Sunday, May the whatever it is, 25th, something like that. 2025. Yeah, it's 5/25/25. Square root day. Um, so what exactly is happening in the world of crypto? Well, if you've noticed the Bitcoin VEPs and the crypto VEPs, most of them have been having a nice day to the downside a little bit today so far. Why? Well, because of the volatility and the entropy we're both showing you, and the COV and the returns oscillator were also pretty much showing you that on the day it was likely to head further south, as we covered yesterday in our live stream. If you watched it, if not, go check it out. It's on Rumble. Um, what is happening today? Well, okay, let's step back. Apart from the VEPs, what's happening in the broader market, in the broader picture of the market, right? People who don't trade, people who buy and hold, and people who do buy and sell, but they don't buy and sell as active traders, right? They might cash out after they make nice gains after holding for 6 months, a year, 5 years, however long. Bitcoin and crypto are so rare that this will happen. And by this, I mean you are going to see the flippening of the US dollar with Bitcoin. When will that happen? Probably not tomorrow, but probably a lot sooner than you think. Now, the probability of the US dollar ceasing to be the world reserve currency this year or even next year or even the year after or even the year after that is slim, okay? And by probability, I mean the mathematical probability. Based on what? Based on numbers, maths. If you actually look at the normal distribution of dollars around the world and the normal distribution of Bitcoin around the world, or even the Laplace distributions of those things, you will see that very obviously there are more dollars than Bitcoins distributed, even than Satoshis. Far more people own dollars or another fiat currency that is pegged to the dollar in some way than own Bitcoins or Satoshis or any other crypto. You have to remember that people, for the most part, most people still don't get crypto. They still, for whatever reason, because they've been mostly misinformed and misled, right? They've been misled to believe all kinds of bad information about crypto, so they think either it's a scam or it'll never be worth anything. It's hype. It's a, it's just it's dead already because all they heard about it was one time they heard about it when it was like having a nice move to the upside in 2021, or maybe they heard about it in 2018 when it was having a nice move to the upside, and then they heard it crashed. Oh, it crashed, so it's going to zero, and that's the last they heard about it and paid any attention to it. And that's like 99% of the retail public that's ever heard of crypto. And if you're in the crypto space, you have to realize you're actually in a tiny minority. Even if 10% of Americans hold some crypto at the moment, only a fraction of them, a tiny fraction of them, do anything with it, like at all, like acquire more, or move it from one wallet to another for whatever reason, or use it to purchase anything. It's like the tiniest. It's almost negligible. It's 100 million people. All right, let's say it's grown to 200 million people since last summer. Okay, now there are constantly more people opening up new crypto wallets. Okay, even if it's 300 million people at this point that hold some crypto, of which let's say a third or even a half of them are holding some Bitcoin. Okay, 150 million people holding Bitcoin out of 300 million people holding crypto, out of 8 billion people on the planet, and most of them don't do anything with it. It's negligible. The amount of people actually doing anything with it and that have any amount worth anything, like more than a hamburger, or more than $100 worth, which in some places you can pay $100 for a hamburger. But like the sheer amount of people that don't have anything to do with crypto vastly, vastly outnumbers the amount of people that do anything with their crypto. It is still considered very much an outlier technology for the tech bros and the nerds and the geeks into tech that the cypherpunks. Even though you would have thought after 16 years of seeing this asset rise to more than 17 billion% returns from the time it launched at zero on the markets in 2009, you would have thought by now people would have taken notice that, hey, this thing is actually more interesting than we've been led on to believe. All the rich people that said for years, yeah, no, this thing is a scam, every last one of them has said, yeah, no, okay, actually, we own it. We buy it. Even Peter Schiff, the guy who still to this day says that Bitcoin is, going to zero, basically. Like that guy, Dan, what's his name? Dan Pena or something like that? And Bitcoin going to zero. That guy. The guy who claims he knows Satoshi. And that when you discover who he is, too, everyone's going to dump their Bitcoin. It's going to go to zero. Hasn't happened yet. It's been a good 6 years or 8 years since he said that nonsense. Whatever the hell he said it. Like the guy's a freaking meme of himself. He's such a shill guru, self-improvement guru shill guy. Totally exposed. Just like every other liar that said Bitcoin's a scam. The only people that ever said Bitcoin's a scam are people that are butthurt that they missed the boat early on and they can't get over it. Those are the only people. Plenty of people missed the boat. They got over it. A lot of them jumped back in eventually. Most haven't. And they don't care. They don't need any. They don't want any. They're going to live their life without it. Great. The thing is, one day, it will be, very probably, the global currency reserve. Like I said, it may not be tomorrow. It's probably not going to be tomorrow. It's probably not going to be next year. Might not even be by the time Bitcoin hits $1 million or $10 million. But by the time Bitcoin does hit $10 million or $20 million or $30 million, it's going to be a very hard argument to say that the US dollar should remain the world global currency reserve when the fiat purchasing power keeps falling. And the fiat purchasing power has already lost more than 99.9% of its value to Bitcoin in just the last 16 years since Bitcoin launched. Right? Think about that. It has lost 99.9% of its value against Bitcoin in 16 years. What do you think it's going to do in the next 16 years? You think it's suddenly going to go up in value? You think they're going to suddenly burn half the dollars and make every dollar worth twice as much? Or do you think they're just going to keep printing more dollars to try to print their way out of this? Even the guy who's in charge of, the Commerce Secretary, whatever, or the Treasury Secretary, I forget his name, currently of the U.S. Why do I forget his name? Anyway, this guy, Trump's Commerce Secretary or Treasury Secretary, Scott. Anyway, that guy, he himself said that whatever we're going through, we can get through it. Meaning, and he was basically saying that we are having huge financial problems and huge economic problems, and that we'll get through it by, whatever it is, tariffs or taxes or whatever economic plan they're trying to put in place. I don't care if you agree with it or not, that it's going to work or not. The fact is, even the guy that's running the thing, they're running the economic show in the U.S., who, came in off of a campaign of saying, we're going to make this great. Even he's saying, yeah, no, we got big problems and we got to work our way through it. Right? The U.S. dollar, and it's certainly not the worst economy, still one of the strongest economies in the world, despite all the uncertainty and the chaos and everything else that came in following Trump's, beginning of his second term. Okay? Before that, U.S. economy was growing at a nice tick. Whether you like it or not, whether you want to admit it or not, under the Biden administration, the U.S. economy was growing very nicely. I'm not saying that that meant great things for most employees, because it didn't. Most people working were still having a terrible time under Biden. Okay, but the economy, as it is measured objectively by nonpartisan groups that measure housing, unemployment, inflation, interest, cost of living, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, the same exact metrics they've used for many decades were showing that during the Biden administration, things were growing nicely. Now, again, I don't give credit to presidents, and I don't blame presidents for making the economy or breaking the economy, because they don't. Now, can they impact it? Yeah, sure, they can impact it. Things like taxes or tariffs or deregulation or regulation or whatever it is, right? Other side of the aisle. All that can affect it, right? Tax and spend, of course it can. But does it make or break the economy? No, it does not. Presidents get too much credit for when things go right and too much blame for when things go wrong on both sides of the aisle. Certainly when it comes to the economy. Plus, these things take a while to implement. So anything that's a president initiates today will take it, even if it's launched, fully signed off on, and in the works. It's going to take at least 3 to 6 months to have any real impact on the actual economy. Right? This is how it goes. Things are not instantly activated and instantly felt in a market so large as the U.S. economy. Right? It just doesn't happen. It takes too long. It's 400 million people, 50 states, a large swath of land, massive amounts of businesses. It takes a lot to actually trickle through and start making a difference. Okay. And so what I can say is that is why it will also take a while for the US dollar to suddenly be not the world reserve currency. It may take many years, it may take decades, and of course the US government will do everything it can to hang on to that title of being the world reserve economy. Why? Because the world reserve currency. Because obviously they want the financial benefits that come with that title, right? They want to be able to buy money cheap and to take cheap loans and to to be able to basically borrow money at low rates, which is much easier to do when you have the world currency reserve as your currency, and it's much harder to do when you're any other country, which is why many countries have long felt cheated by the fact that they are not also a world currency reserve, and that the US is basically the only one. And they feel like the US is basically a service economy that's able to buy cheap goods from everyone else. And what everybody else is able to do is to buy dollars that get cheaper and cheaper from the US. But those dollars have less and less value. That's why they're getting cheaper and cheaper. Right? They're getting more and more dollars over time because the dollars themselves are worth less and less money each and every day. Over time, obviously. Bitcoin, which does not have an infinite supply, is print X times the amount that is being mined every day. What does that mean? That means that, let's say, however many blocks are mined in a day, whatever the number is, let's say there's 50 blocks in a day, then that means that roughly 150 to 300 blocks worth of Bitcoins are actually being bought by the biggest buyers on the planet, which we know include Strategy and all the 9 big ETF firms, companies like BlackRock, etc., and a lot of other, big firms, and plenty of smaller ones, still relatively smaller ones like Metaplanet in Japan, which is a hotel chain which converted its treasury to Bitcoin and is now basically a Bitcoin company, just like Strategy, where they just buy and hold Bitcoin and they make money seeing their growth, growing with Bitcoin. And they've been buying for about a year, and their stock has gone up something. The last I looked at was last week. It was like they went up like 2,700% from last year, their stock value. Those are insane gains, and they're only possible because they're buying everything that they can of Bitcoin. and that's literally giving them massive returns on their stock growth, because it's giving their treasury massive returns, because Bitcoin has had a particularly good year since they started buying last year, right? I mean, frankly, they should have been buying since January 2023. They'd have even more insane returns, but they didn't. They started in 2024 around this time in May. And since then, they've grown tremendously. They've had amazing success. And they're likely to have continued amazing success as long as they keep buying more Bitcoin, right? Why do you think that is? You think it's just a random coincidence? Not really a random coincidence, right? Like, they're going to keep seeing massive gains as long as it's not just because there's a Bitcoin bull run. Sure, when there's a Bitcoin bear market, if you want to call it that, even though I don't believe there's such a thing as a bull run or a bear market, but I understand people call it that. When there's an extended period of sell pressure, of course people will be selling their stock, because people always sell stocks when they're dipping low. That's just how people are. Yes, long-term investors will keep holding and even buying when prices go down, because they're smart and they have access to more money, and they will keep buying. But people who need cash, they're going to be selling. Nothing wrong with that. That's how the market is. And people who don't know any better and are panicking, sure, they're going to sell too, because they don't know any better. So what really can people say or do in order to secure their financial future when it comes to Bitcoin? Well, of course, you can begin to acquire. That's up to you if you ever do. I'm not telling you to acquire. I'm just saying most people are not acquiring, and the ones who understand money, they are acquiring. And when I say the ones who understand money, I mean literally every big player is buying. Every big bank, every, frankly, medium bank, and even small banks. As many governments as possible are buying, whether they've announced it or not. We know that. We can see that. Central banks are buying like crazy all around the world. The Fed doesn't want to buy, but we know that huge banks in the U.S. are buying. We know that huge financial institutions in the U.S. are buying. We know that huge whales are buying. It's, you could say, oh, it's just a scam. It's just a bubble. Bubbles don't usually last 16 years. Certainly not bubbles on brand new things. The internet bubble lasted a few years, and that was considered a very long-lasting bubble. The original .com bubble lasted from like 1994, if you want to call it that, to like the year 2000. But it really was like 1998 to 2000, or you could even say 1996 to 2000. So 3-4 years. Yeah, sure, it started in 94, kind of, when the browser, 93, 94, when the browser was kind of developing, and Mosaic was coming out and Netscape was coming out, and you could say that was kind of the launch of the bubble. But it really wasn't the launch of the bubble until these companies started going public, or actually until the first big acquisition, when Time Warner bought AOL, or AOL bought Time Warner. Yeah, AOL bought Time Warner. That, you could say, was the beginning of the bubble, okay, of the .com bubble, when the .coms were being so overvalued that they were buying traditional big businesses with their .com cash. Well, that didn't work out so well for AOL, did it? And moreover, people always compare Bitcoin to the tulip craze of Holland. Tulip craze, as I posted about many times, lasted a whopping 3 years if you include the entire timeline. You could say stretch it to 4, but really, it was like a year. Maybe 2, arguably, but it was a year. Wasn't anywhere near 16 years. And that was at a time when information moved slower. So in theory, a craze could last longer, because it would take longer for word to get around that the craze is over. It died within a year. The mania of when people were paying ridiculous prices for a tulip. Some guy sold his farm for literally a tulip, which is crazy. You got a farm, you got land, you can grow your own tulips. craze was insane, and it was a very great explain the Bitcoin craze in the early days of Bitcoin. But by the time that it was being used as an expression of how Bitcoin is a craze, so it already wasn't fitting from its inception. Remember, the price started at zero, had really nowhere to go but up, and it's gone up 17.8 billion% to the all-time highs of this past week, this current week, whatever. Anybody ever mention anything about the tulip craze before word got around about the story about the tulip craze? Even more, right? But let's just say it was 4 or 5 years, even though it was longer, right? Well, after the first hype cycle that lasted through like 2013 ended, then there was a down year. Hold on one second. After the first hype cycle went away, there was a down year in like 2000, what was it, 15, 14, right? So 10, 11, 12, 13. So yeah, so like in 2014, there was a down year. And then in 2015 and 16 and 17, again, there was up years. And then 2018, there was a down year. Then 2019 and 20 and 21, there were up years again. And then 2022, there was a down year. And then 2023, 24, 25, so far, it's been up. In 2023, it's been up. 2024, it's been up. 2025, so far, it's been up. Yes, a little bit up, but still up. So if it was a tulip craze, it would have ended a long time ago. People would have said, oh, it's just a craze. We're not going back. Oh, another cycle of growth on top of the first one. Right? Well, that's why people who understand money are buying this stuff, because they know it's not a craze. Look at all the biggest liars. Look at Jamie Dimon and all these other big banksters who are the biggest criminals of all when it comes to, like, they will steal the universe. And you could say they're just doing what they're supposed to do. They're hired to do that. No, I get that. They're still liars. That word very specifically, and I don't hate them for it. By the way, right? Nothing. I don't hate Jamie Dimon or something, but he's a bankster. For years, he was telling people, time he was ordering some of his employees to buy as much of it as they could. And he was saying Bitcoin is trash, crypto is trash. And he was saying, crypto is trash, Bitcoin is trash, but blockchain is good. Mouth said this. He's just lying, and he's buying as much as possible. And sure enough, buying some. What does that have to do with anything? And then these actions between themselves and their bank. If you're a private VIP customer at JP Morgan, that's not what you care about. You don't need that. Right? They made their own. They wanted to compete with XRP. They wanted to put XRP out of business. Let's just be honest. They failed to do that. So they wanted to have something there to compete with it. They failed to do that. Nobody wants to use the JP Morgan blockchain. Maybe they'll come up with a use case at some point, but who the hell's going to... Internally, you shouldn't be paying fees or high fees to send between the same bank from one account to another. And if they are, there's something very wrong with that bank, because it's in the same bank. They don't even have to transfer it to anywhere. It's immediately deposited from one account to another. No, they were just lying. He was just lying, and the people that worked for him were just lying. By the way, he fired people who said that Bitcoin was going to be the next big thing and that they were going to get into Bitcoin products. He fired somebody for that. One of his top guys, actually. Who took the blame for them not getting into it early enough. It was what's his name? It was Dimon himself. Right? It was Jamie Dimon who said that they wouldn't get into it because he said Bitcoin is trash, or whatever words he used exactly. I don't want to mischaracterize it, but what words did he actually use exactly? I want to remember the quote because I don't want to misquote him. Jamie Dimon, Bitcoin is trash. Oh, Bitcoin. Okay, no, he was at that conference they do in Switzerland during the winter every year. This was some years ago. Yeah, at least a couple years ago. JP Morgan Chase chairman, CEO said on Squawk Box that Bitcoin is a, quote, hyped up fraud. And also, Bitcoin said, quote, Jamie Dimon said, quote, Bitcoin is garbage and a Ponzi scheme. Garbage and a Ponzi scheme. So, yeah, not trash, garbage and a Ponzi scheme. And he also said that it's useless as a pet rock. That's a quote. These are all quotes you could find right in Google. Useless as a pet rock. It's all lies. He also called Bitcoin, quote, a waste of time. It's just unbelievable. Like, look, I'm one of the people that instantly at the very beginning of its existence saw its use case as extremely useful. The public ledger is extremely useful to me. The archivable information that is retrievable has always been extremely useful to me. It's one of the main reasons I ever got into it and liked it. Like, it's an easy way to pay certain people for certain things, and it's also extremely useful as an archive system and a reference system for the future. It's extremely useful. People who don't get it don't get it. But those of us who do, we know why it's useful. And sure, it's visible and portable and scalable and immutable, and you can travel around the world with it, etc. I get it. Sure, uncensorable, all that stuff. But it's, to me, also extremely useful as an archival and retrieval system for information. It's one of the most important things that it does, actually. A public ledger of archival information. Not just transactions of Bitcoins. Yes, those are recorded there too. And the archival information is archived by transactions of Bitcoin. But it's the information itself that is written onto the blockchain that is extremely useful. And if you know, you know. If you don't know, one day maybe you'll find out. Maybe not. But I can tell you from the very early days, Bitcoin has been extremely useful in that capacity. And you could tell me all day long till the cows come home, but there's centralized databases that do a far better job, and they're faster, and you can retrieve information, and they're also very secure, blah, blah, blah. But they're centralized, so they're not nearly as secure as a decentralized database. I don't care if it's slow. I care that it's a better archiving system. Bitcoin, there is no better archiving system than Bitcoin right now on Earth. There just isn't. Not even the web. And I love the web. I've been publishing on the web since literally the beginning.